Hey, how's it going? I've been getting super into the DC Compact comics, and one of the ones I picked up recently was Superman Batman by Jeph Loeb, Ed McGuinness, and Michael Turner. For those of you not in the know, this collects the 2003 run of Superman Batman. In fact, I believe after this it was called Batman Superman, and I think most recently it's been called Batman Superman World's Finest. And I believe a few decades before this as well, there was a kind of like Batman Superman style comic line called DC's World's Finest or whatever. But the idea is, it's not a Batman story, it's not a Superman story, it's a Batman and a Superman story. I know, it's a wild concept. And the way Jeph Loeb approaches this in this book, I don't know if this is the same for all the others, but in this book, you know how a lot of the time you'll have like these captions kind of like telling you the inner thoughts of like, if it's a Batman book, you'll have Batman's inner dialogue. If it's a Superman book, you'll have Superman's inner dialogue. In this book, you have both, which means you have Batman in blue and Superman in yellow. And that's used in really interesting ways a lot of the time, because you'll have Batman thinking about Superman and Superman thinking about Batman, and you'll see how they view each other, and you'll see just how conflicts arise within both of their perspectives at the same time. One of my favorite aspects of narrative in general is perspective, and so I found this to be really fascinating actually, because not only do you get their inner dialogues about how they feel about each other, but you also get their external dialogues and see how different that is to their internal dialogues. And I'm struggling to think of other books which are this good at portraying that kind of like every element of what makes up a relationship, at least in comics. I'm thinking in terms of novels, you've got like multiple perspectives within like epic fantasy and stuff like that, and this is, I think, as close as you get to that kind of a deep examination of what makes characters tick. And we get a lot of fun with parallels as well, with like, you know, Superman being like, this is a love story, and Batman being like, this is a detective story, or Superman being like, I grew up in Kansas where this happened and that informed my way of looking at things, and then next to it you'll have, I grew up in Gotham where I learned the harsh things about life, and you can see how those upbringings then affect the way that they approach the situation differently. And in examining the differences between these two characters as well as the parallels between them, you really get to examine each individual character in greater depth as well than you might in their own books alone. I will say, however, one criticism I do have while we're talking about dialogue is I think it does get a bit messy sometimes when you have a page with, you know, maybe like 3 panels, and in every single panel you've got Batman's internal dialogue, Superman's internal dialogue, and then the actual dialogue between the two of them. And it will be like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that really does kind of like cut up the flow of dialogue in a way, which sometimes had me going, all right, I'm just going to read all of the like internal dialogue and all of the external dialogue. I've been saying dialogue this entire time. Obviously when it's internal it's a monologue, but you know what I mean. But anyway, sorry, I just kind of launched into a thing about the book I really liked there. I haven't really told you what this book is yet. Book 1 of Superman Batman is basically the first 2 trade paperback volumes of the Jeph Loeb run, from what I can tell. And they very much have distinctive stories. There is definitely a first half and a second half to this book, which you can easily point at and go, that's volume 1 and that's volume 2. But there is a long-running story that takes place between the two of them, which I really like actually. In the first story, we have a kryptonite meteorite that's heading to Earth. It's a real planet killer, this one, and we see how President Lex Luthor, who's president at this time, is dealing with the situation and turning heroes against each other and so on and so forth. And then in the second story, we have the emergence of Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, I think for the first time since Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? I've heard a little bit of background about how people really wanted her back in the DC universe for a long time, and I think this is a story where she finally comes back for the first time. But I really like the way that the first story links into the second story while both of them maintain the identity of being completely unique stories. Now, I will say, I do have some nitpicks about this book as well. First of all, there are a few things in this book which just come across off to me. Firstly, there's a moment when a bunch of heroes assault the White House because they believe that Lex Luthor has Batman and Superman. To which Lex Luthor says, "Ha, you fools, I was lying about that to draw them out. Instead I got you. Now tell me, where are Batman and Superman?" To which I say, Lex Luthor, you're the smartest man alive. If these people came looking for Batman and Superman, Why do you think that they would know where they are? What are you talking about? Well, Lex Luthor thinks he's the smartest man alive in any case. He's meant to be very intelligent. And then without getting into spoilers, there's a moment towards the end of this book, so I guess the second trade paperback volume, the Supergirl story, where a character acts really, really upset in a way that we, the reader, are meant to believe is real until it's revealed that they knew what was going on the entire time. And I don't know, I don't particularly buy that they were acting. It came across too real. I guess that's hard to portray in a comic book, but I don't know, man. It kind of felt like a cop-out instead of like okay. Also, this book in particular definitely spent a little bit too long on the idea of heroes turning against each other. And I get that this was a pre-Civil War world. This was kind of in the era when we were really fascinated with having heroes turn on each other. This was a pre-Injustice world. We had yet to write the best of those stories. So maybe this was just kind of a new concept back in 2003. I don't know. I haven't read enough older comics to know, really. But a lot of that felt super contrived. Like, you know, Starfire fighting against Superman because Lex Luthor said there is a kryptonite meteorite heading to planet Earth and Superman is to blame for it. Bring him in. Starfire and a bunch of other heroes who I don't really know that well were like, yes, that sounds right. Let's go and bring Superman in. Are you for real? You're just going to trust Lex Luthor? Why would Superman be the problem here? Why would he have anything to do with that meteorite? What, because it's made of kryptonite? Get out of here. And then again, in the Supergirl story, I don't think it's giving too much away to say that Superman feels very overly protective of Supergirl while other people are suspicious towards her, and that leads to a lot of conflict between Superman and some of the other heroes, which frankly felt a little un-Superman-like at its height. I'm not sure I love the way Jeph Loeb writes Superman in general. Like, the story itself was fine and good, but he felt just a little too aggressive. Like, I don't know. I don't really know how to say it without people going, well, yeah, Superman's aggressive, of course. He beats up bad guys. What are you talking about? He just felt a little less pure-hearted. I don't know. I like my Superman to be, like, maybe like a smidgen more selfless. And that's not me saying I don't understand where he's coming from in this book. And I do think that that makes sense in the way it was written, and the conflict that arises between him and Batman made sense as well, but it just wasn't necessarily the most fun to read, and it didn't feel like it didn't feel like the characters were being all that intelligent, which I guess you're not always going to be in these kinds of matters, but yeah, it just didn't land for me, some of it. But in detailing these nitpicks, I've made it sound like I did not enjoy this book. I really enjoyed this book. This compact comic is listed as Book 1. It's called Superman Batman Book 1, although nowhere on the actual book itself, just on like Wikipedia pages and stuff, I'm noticing. But that does make me wonder if they're going to continue Jeph Loeb's trade paperback run, like maybe volumes 3 and 4 in a book 2. That would be interesting. I'm not sure I've seen any compact comics do a book 2 of a run yet. They all seem to be very standalone as of right now. Oh, actually, that's another thing I should mention. I get the impression I maybe should have waited until I read Batman Hush to read this, because a lot of Batman's characterization probably makes a bit more sense in the wake of what I understand about what goes on in that story. But it's comics. I'm going to approach it in a non-linear way. I understand the basics behind kind of what happens in Batman Hush, and why it would lead to Batman feeling this kind of a way with a lot of the stuff that's talked about Jason Todd in here. For those not aware, I am doing a series called The Bat Catalogue, where I go through and read all of Eagle Moss's Legend of Batman in their chronological order, and I have been taking to filling in gaps where it makes sense. So I did pick up The Long Halloween, and I have picked up Batman Hush in compact comic format. It's the only one I've got that I haven't read yet, and I'm going to save that until it makes sense to read that within the Bat catalogue. But yeah, I feel like this story very much takes place after that, and maybe not too long after that. None of these compact comics are ever going to be truly standalone in terms of just pick up and read it. However, they do publish them in a way that you're not going to feel like you're missing out on too much by picking them up and reading them, at least when they do them right. I've yet to really come across one that's made me go, I don't know what's going on here. So I don't know if it would be a bad idea for them to actually do like a book 2. Maybe if they just call it Superman Batman Book 2, you know, like, don't shy away from putting a number on there. I know people have opinions about that, and I think a lot of the time, yeah, if you're doing, like, the DC finest stuff, it's good to not put numbers on the back of them. But if it's going to stop you from publishing Superman Batman Book 2 in general, then whatever, just put Book 2 on it, who cares? Let compact comics have sequels to themselves. Just don't worry about publishing the entire continuity in a line of volumes from 1 to 1,000,000. Because honestly, that is the kind of thing that would hold me back from buying a DC compact comic sometimes, I think, is if I know that it collects, like, the beginnings of a story, but then they're never going to get around to publishing the continuation of that story in the same format. Like, Deceased Book 1 is out, right? Are they going to do Deceased Book 2? But anyway, that's kind of a discussion for another video. So here it is, DC Comics, Superman, Batman. As I've already told you multiple times, I love the compact comics format. I love how the spines look. I love the general feel of the book. But yeah, what's fun about this book is being a collection of 2 trade paperback volumes. You've got 2 main artists, I believe Ed McGuinness for the first one and Michael Turner for the second one, if the title is to be believed. And what I feel like the most immediate indication of this is how in the first story you've got short-eared Batman, right? Stay with me. This is an unimportant thing, but I like to make a big deal about it. You got short-eared Batman, and then afterwards, if I can find it, you've got long-eared Batman. Look at those long pointy ears. I love long-eared Batman. If every artist portrayed Batman as having long pointy ears, the world would be a utopian society. But anyway, I just found that funny that his ears grow in length over the course of this book. But I do really love art from both artists here. I think this is a really nice looking book. You know, I've already said this isn't my favorite era of comics. I don't know all of the heroes that show up. I think it's a little too ensemble. I was hoping it would be a little bit more like purely Batman, Superman. But at the same time, it was a really fun book. Surprisingly important lore takes place in this book. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is like a peripheral bunch of stories because it's like a team-up book or whatever. I don't know if that's a thing with team-up books, but that was my initial understanding or assumption, I guess. But no, Supergirl's reintroduction into DC Comics is pretty damn important. So it was cool to see that take place here. And actually, I think it was great that it was, you know, it did contain some important stories in here. And yeah, I really love this book. But yeah, that pretty much brings me to the end of the DC Compact comics I've picked up recently, apart from Batman Hush, which I'm going to keep in reserve for when it's appropriate for the Bat catalogue. I may slow down on the Compact comics acquisition just for a little bit, or I may not. I have just created a spreadsheet detailing every one and whether I have them and whether I've read them. I do have my first DC Finest book and my first Marvel Epic Collection book in the post. You will probably have seen me put up a short about getting those by now, but for me, that's still in the future. And I can't wait for those, but I think I should probably focus on getting through my Legend of Batman books for the for the foreseeable future. I don't think there's too much else in DC Compact Comics that is really pulling at me to go and check it out, except for maybe Kingdom Come. I'm really curious about that story. And I also hear really good things about The New Frontier. Is that what it's called? And I still only have one Marvel Premiere collection. But hey, whatever. Stay tuned to this channel to see whatever crazy directions my brain takes me next time. Please like the video if you liked it. It helps my small channel a lot. And subscribe for more comic reviews, book reviews, all sorts of reviews. I'll review your face if you want me to. No, I won't do that. Anyway, bye.